Rising star Tae-joon stood at the top of the podium in Paris for the men's under 58-kilogram taekwondo event, marking the first title for South Korea in that weight class. The nation's state-run think tank revised down South Korea's growth outlook for this year by 0.1 percentage point to 2.5%, citing weaker demand at home. Russia says Ukrainian troops have crossed into the border region of Kursk and launched an attack, marking the biggest incursion since the war began. It's August 8th, 6 p.m. in Seoul. This is Newscenter. Thank you for joining us. I'm Yoon Jung-min. We start in Paris, where Korea's Park Tae-joon clinched a historic gold medal in the men's taekwondo flyweight division. Lee Seung-jae covers this match and more.
Taekwondo is Korea's traditional martial art. It's an event the country long dominated in the past. But for 16 years, the South Koreans failed to win a gold medal in the sport at the Olympics. That all changed on Wednesday when Park Tae-joon claimed the top podium spot in the men's under 58-kilogram competition. On the first day of Taekwondo competitions in Paris, Park took a commanding lead in the final, winning the opening round 9-0 and the second round 13-1 against Gassim Magomedov of Azerbaijan. However, Magomedov withdrew due to injury with a little more than a minute left, giving Park the gold medal and the country's first ever top finish in the weight class. The gold medal for Park also gave South Korea their 12th gold in Paris, one shy of tying with its previous best. Over in the men's high jump event, South Korea's flag bearer and high jumper Woo Sang-hyuk cruised through in the qualification round to advance to the final. With the top 12 out of 31 jumpers qualifying for the final, Woo tied for third after clearing 2.27 meters. Woo has been one of the top jumpers in the world during the past 3 years, finishing fourth at the Tokyo Games. And another Woo qualified for the finals, this time Woo Ha-ram in the men's 3-meter springboard event on Wednesday. The South Korean, who's considered a medal hopeful in the competition, finished 9th out of 18 divers in the semifinals with 432 points. Woo is hoping to better his 4th-place finish in Tokyo with a place on the podium. And speaking of a podium finish, the South Korean women's table tennis team is now one win away from clinching a spot in the finals and a shot at a podium finish. But the trio of Shin Yu-bin, Chun Ji-hee, and Lee Eun-hae have the tough task of facing off against the top-ranked China on Thursday. A medal in the competition would mean the country's first in team competition in 16 years. Meanwhile, South Korea currently has 12 gold, 8 silver, and 7 bronze medals in Paris, and still have a shot of adding more to the tally. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
South Korea's economic think tank has slightly cut its 2024 growth outlook for the country to 2.5%, citing weaker demand at home. Kim Beom-soo tells us more.
Weak domestic demand constraining on export-led recovery. That is how a major state-run think tank, the Korea Development Institute, evaluated South Korea's economy, while revising down the country's economic growth outlook. The KDI cut this year's economic growth forecast to 2.5% on Thursday, marking a 0.1 percentage point fall from its earlier projection presented in May. The outlook is on par with those by the International Monetary Fund and Bank of Korea, and is lower than those made by South Korean government and the OECD, which forecast a 2.6% growth. Primarily fueled by semiconductors, exports are forecast to grow at a faster clip, with the Institute jacking up the export growth forecast this year from 5.6% to 7%. It shared a rather grim outlook, however, for consumer spending and equipment investment, revising the consumption down to 1.5% from its earlier forecast of 1.8%, and cutting its projection for facility investment to 0.4% from the previous 2.2%.
The growth of domestic demand centered on private consumption and facility investment is expected to fall short of earlier projections. Considering the prolonged trend of high interest rates compared to consumer prices and economic conditions, the recovery of domestic demand is likely to be delayed.
Due to weak domestic demand and falling global oil prices due to potential slowdown in the U.S. and China, consumer prices are forecast to climb 2.4% this year, which is 0.2 percentage points lower than in the forecast in May. The think tank also cited external factors, such as geopolitical risks in the Middle East or a sharp economic downturn in China or the U.S., as potential risks that could slow South Korea's economic growth. Kim Beom-soo, Arirang News.
In the U.S., stocks on Wall Street closed lower on Wednesday as the market struggled to stage a comeback amid lingering uncertainty among investors. Our finance correspondent Moon Hae-ryun has the latest.
Major U.S. stock indexes closed lower on Wednesday, failing to recover fully from the big sell-offs on Monday. The Dow Jones Industrial Average closed 0.6% lower, and the S&P 500 shed nearly 0.8%, while the tech-heavy Nasdaq dropped by more than 1%. Throughout the trading session, the three indexes saw morning gains as the Bank of Japan commented that the central bank would not raise rates when financial markets are unstable, boosting market sentiment. Trade involving the Japanese yen has been a key factor in the sequence of events leading to global market volatility, as investors borrow the cheaper yen to trade into stocks and other assets. But with Japan's central bank raising its benchmark interest rate at the end of last month, paired with weak U.S. economic data stoking fears of a recession in the world's biggest economy, investors have been quick to sell. While investor sentiment is slowly leveling out, with Wall Street's losses on Wednesday not as drastic as those seen earlier this week, big tech stocks saw large fluctuations. Nvidia, one of Wall Street's most central companies, started out with a gain of more than 4% before it ended on a loss of more than 5%. Supermicro computer stocks tumbled by more than 20% after it reported lower than expected quarterly earnings. Tesla and Meta platforms also slipped, as well as global homestay platform Airbnb. These latest developments were reflected in the South Korean stock market on Thursday, as the country's benchmark Kospi and the secondary Kosdaq both began and ended the day's trading on a low. The Kospi and the Kosdaq closed just under 0.5% lower than the previous day after seeing bigger fluctuations at the start of the trading session. Stocks of chip makers SK Hynix and Samsung Electronics both fell. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
The founder of Kakao Corporation, Kim Beom-soo, has been taken to trial over allegations of stock manipulation. Prosecutors indicted Kim on Thursday under detention on allegations of violating the Capital Markets Act after he had been issued with an arrest warrant 2 weeks ago. The warrant accused him of interfering in stocks for 1 day, but after investigation, he was accused of interfering for 3 other days as well. He is also suspected of failing to report holdings of SM Entertainment by a private equity fund he allegedly colluded with. The allegations come in connection with the acquisition of SM Entertainment last year. Kim is alleged to have manipulated SM's stock price to prevent a takeover by Hype. Many areas in the country are facing shrinking populations. Among those, Goseong-gun County down in the south has been coming up with ways to counter this problem. Our correspondent Park Gun-woo joins us in the studio. Hi, Gun-woo.
Evening, Jungmin.
Tell us more about this county. What's special about it?
Of course. So it's located in Gyeongsang-namdo province near the south coast and between the cities of Tongyeong and Jinju. And last year, according to official data from the county's office, the population there was over 50,000. But recent data shows that it has fallen below a number. As the number of residents is falling, the county has been coming up with ways to prevent the situation from getting worse. So let's take a look at how. Goseong-gun is a county in Gyeongsang-namdo province located in the southern part of the Korean peninsula with less than 50,000 residents. Due to its continuously shrinking population, the region has been coming up with new ways to address the crisis. One of the representative ways is rebranding the county as an optimal spot for sports events and off-season training, with its great facilities and infrastructure, bringing in many athletes from different regions.
Training facilities here are good, especially because this year's National Sports Festival will be held in Goseong, and it's a great opportunity to watch and learn each player's strengths while training.
In the first half of 2024, Goseong-gun County held 41 sports events, including international and national sports competitions, including for triathlon, handball, and soccer. Attracting over 80,000 people during that period, the county created an economic effect worth around $4 million, twice as much as in the previous year. Goseong-gun County calculated the economic effect by multiplying the visitors, athletes, coaches, and families with the predicted average cost of around $54 per day for accommodation and food.
Accommodation costs accounts for the biggest pie among the total spending. Then it will be food costs, as it's important to eat well during off-season training. Food costs are huge as we try to consume meat each meal.
With more people coming into the region, an official of Goseong-gun County spoke about plans to accept the increasing number of visitors.
We will continue to expand the infrastructure for sports facilities. For example, we already built the first baseball stadium in the previous year and the second one in May to welcome more baseball players.
He also spoke about plans for increasing lodging facilities, including youth hostels, so that the county can hold more sports events. Along with these efforts, Goseong-gun County aims to create an economic effect of over $6 million in the latter half of the year. In order to do so, this coastal county aims to bring more people into the region by hosting scores of sports events and off-season training for teams and athletes, as it did in the first half of the year.
Interesting. And can you tell us in more detail how the region will try to achieve that goal?
Yes, so in order to achieve that goal, the county is preparing to, hold these off-season training camps along with 40 more sports events in the latter half of the year. And according to this county, those include the National Sports Festival set to be held in October, and other nationwide competitions including tennis, billiards, and shirim, the Korean national traditional wrestling. Accordingly, the county anticipates an economic effect of around $11 million in this year, with around 4,000 teams and 80,000 athletes visiting Goseong.
And Konu, aside from sports marketing, what else is the county working on?
So as it's also famous for its dinosaur footsteps being discovered in Korea for the first time, Goseong-gun is also preparing to strengthen its tourism content, especially for the annual Dinosaur World Expo set to be held in October.
If we don't change, our region will gradually vanish. Some people feel sick of the expo as there haven't been big changes since it started 18 years ago. Starting from small things, we should keep changing in order to create new things.
The CU also said they are coming up with various events, including circuses and parades, so that more people can visit. In fact, their goal is to bring over 200,000 visitors to the expo, around 20,000 more than the year before. And he added that creating new attractions will allow the county to become a hub of tourism, which will lead to economic and cultural vitalization, along with more jobs being created.
All right, thanks for your report today, Kanu.
My pleasure.
Over the international front, there's been a rare Ukrainian incursion into Russia's Kursk region. It's been reported as one of the largest incursions into Russia since the war began in 2022. Tae-joon has the latest.
Russia's defense ministry has said that up to 1,000 Ukrainian troops entered Russia near the town of Sudza on Tuesday morning local time. The Ukrainian army began a ground offensive with tanks and armored combat vehicles following missile and drone attacks. A state of emergency was declared, leading to thousands of people evacuating from the Kursk region. The Russian Chief of General Staff Valery Gerasimov reported to President Vladimir Putin that Russian forces had halted around 1,000 Ukrainian soldiers with airstrikes, missiles, and artillery fire and pushed them back to the border in a nighttime operation. Gerasimov said that the enemy's losses amounted to 315 people, including at least 100 killed and 215 wounded. 54 armored vehicles, including 7 tanks, were destroyed. President Putin accused Ukraine of launching an unprovoked assault on civilian buildings and residences.
The Kyiv regime has undertaken another large-scale provocation and is conducting indiscriminate shelling with various types of weaponry, including missiles, of civilian buildings, residential buildings, and ambulances.
Ukraine has not commented on the attack, but did announce that it is carrying out a large-scale plan while revealing its infiltration mission into the Kherson area, which is occupied by Russia.
We had hundreds of meetings and talks to strengthen the capabilities of our aviation, to strengthen the capabilities of our air defense system, of our defense forces.
Ukraine has been launching missile attacks on Russia. However, the incursion into the Kursk region by mobilizing infantry is considered to be unusual. This battle in Kursk appears to be one of the largest incursions into Russia since the war began in February 2022. Tae-joon, Arirang News.
Israel has reaffirmed its resolve to hunt down Yahya Sinwar, the man behind the October 7th attack. The remarks follow Hamas's recent tapping of Sinwar as its new militant leader. Choi Min-jung has more.
Israel's military chief of staff has vowed to target the new Hamas leader, Yahya Sinwar. Speaking during a visit to an Air Force base on Wednesday, Lieutenant General Herzi Halavi said the decision to name Sinwar as its new leader will not absolve him from the fact that he is a murderer.
We will make an effort to find him and attack him, and they can replace once again the head of the political bureau.
Sinwar is believed to be the mastermind behind the October 7th attack when Hamas killed more than 1,000 people during an attack on Israel, including citizens from other countries.
Sinwar is a brutal terrorist with blood on his hands, including the blood of American citizens, and not just American citizens, but citizens of many countries around the world.
Israel's attack on Gaza continued despite the change in Hamas's leadership. The Israeli army issued new evacuation orders on Wednesday for Beit Hanun in northern Gaza. This comes as Israel announced it would forcefully and immediately operate against terror groups in the region, following a rocket attack fired from the area. Meanwhile, top Iranian commander Abdulrahim Mousavi welcomed the appointment of Sinwar as the new political head of Hamas, calling him a great combatant. He added that the new leadership means that Israel will have to give up hopes of survival and collapse. Hamas on Tuesday chose Sinwar as its new leader after Ismail Haniyeh was killed in Iran last week by a strike which is presumed to have been launched by Israel. Regional tensions have soared after the killing. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
In other news, North Korean athletes at the Paris Olympics have reportedly received Samsung smartphones. This has raised concerns about potential violations of a UN sanction that bans the supply of electronic devices to the regime. Our North Korean affairs correspondent Kim Beom-soo explains.
South Korean table tennis mixed doubles bronze winner Im Jong-hoon holding up a Samsung smartphone and taking selfies with his partner Shin Yu-bin, together with Chinese gold medalists and silver medalists from North Korea. As an official sponsor of the International Olympic Games, Samsung has provided its Paris Olympics edition Galaxy smartphones to the IOC, which the committee distributed to athletes in the French capital. The Galaxy Z Flip 6 Olympic edition has appeared several times with winning athletes taking selfies using the device at the podium. The gold-colored phone with Olympic rings engraved on the surface has been made exclusively for athletes competing in this Olympics. But concerns rose as Radio Free Asia reported on Wednesday local time that the IOC distributed the phones to athletes from North Korea as well, hinting at the possibility of a violation of a UN Security Council resolution. Resolution 2397, adopted in 2017, prohibits all member countries from supplying, selling, or transferring electrical equipment to North Korea as they can be modified and used for military purposes. An official at the Ministry of Unification said while there's a possibility that the distribution of Samsung smartphones to North Korean athletes may violate the UN Security Council resolutions, it is the IOC that needs to answer those concerns. Samsung Electronics said the distribution is solely up to the IOC and that the company is not involved in the matter. Back in 2018, during the Pyeongchang Winter Olympics, Samsung again provided smartphones to the IOC, which were offered to athletes from North Korea with a condition that those athletes return them before going back to the North. North Korean athletes refused to accept the phones at the time. Kim Beom-soo, Arirang News.
The rival parties at the National Assembly have agreed to join forces to push what they call undisputed pieces of legislation affecting people's livelihoods. The chief deputy floor leaders of the ruling People Power Party and the main opposition Democratic Party held talks on Thursday and said they will work to process the livelihood-related bills during the remaining August Assembly. One such bill would be the improvement to the current Nursing Act to outline the roles of physician assistants in medical practices. However, no details have yet been finalized on the potential consultative body between the rival parties and the government, suggested by the party leaderships earlier this week. The South Korean government is set to come up with a comprehensive plan to deal with the rising number of fires sparked by electric vehicles. This is according to the Ministry of Environment on Thursday, saying it will host an emergency meeting of the 12th of this month for relevant government agencies, including the Ministry of Industry and Transport and the National Fire Agency. With more EVs on the road in South Korea, there's been a rise in the number of fires caused by them. In 2021, it was 24 cases, and last year 72, with the most recent one in the underground parking lot of an apartment complex in Incheon, which damaged more than 140 cars.
Today, the central parts of the country saw repeated rain until the afternoon. Also, showers fell in the south and on Jeju Island. The south will continue to have showers until tonight. Temperatures have risen significantly in the south, with heatwave warnings in place for most parts of the country. As for today, tropical nights have lasted for 18 days in Seoul. Tomorrow morning, the temperature in Seoul is expected to be 26 degrees Celsius after another tropical night. This heat will persist day and night even after Malbok and National Liberation Day. Please drink plenty of water so that you don't get heat-related illnesses. Tomorrow morning will be as hot as today, with most areas exceeding 24 degrees. Highs will move up to 34 in most parts of the country. There will also be the possibility of showers this weekend. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
That is Newscenter for tonight. Thank you for watching. A panel session coming up.
children's. Laughter, hope, dream. K-animation belongs in them. Interesting and valuable story that transcends between everyday life and dream. Surprising spectacle where imagination becomes real. An array of subjects catering from infants to adolescents. For our story to reach all corners of the world. K-animation makes healthy laughter for children.
Hello and welcome to Within the Frame. Coming to you live from Seoul, I'm Han Da-eun. U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris, now the official Democratic presidential nominee, has upended the presidential race, showing a small lead over the once seemingly invincible rival, Donald Trump. After picking Minnesota Governor Tim Walz as her running mate, Harris has kicked off her battleground state tour, seeking center-left sweet spot in the election battle. Trump's running mate, J.D. Vance, meanwhile, mirrored his opponent's movements as he held events in the same states, but without Trump. All this as a tug-of-war continued between Harris and Trump over setting up a TV debate against each other, an event that could potentially have a significant impact on the race for the White House. Would the Democratic enthusiasm last? What would be the key watch points over the next 90 days? Where do Harris and Trump stand on critical election issues such as the economy? For some clues, we turn to Min Jung-hoon, professor at the Korea National Diplomatic Academy, who joins us in the studio. Thank you, as always, for coming in today.
My pleasure.
So recent polls showed Harris moving ahead of her Republican rival, Donald Trump. Survey USA put Harris up 3 points ahead of Trump, while CBS News made it a 1-point Harris lead, just to name a few. The results were mostly within the margin of error. What factors led to the rapid surge of Harris, and what do you think will be the key to winning the race over the next 90 days?
Yes, and as you mentioned, we can see some public opinion polls that Harris is ahead of Trump, but within the margin of error, like the 1 to 3 percentage point lead. But I think it's a meaningful result for Democrats because Trump has led the public opinion polls since the October last year. And I think the rapid surge of Harris is mainly caused by the situation where Democratic supporters are gathering on the Harris candidacy. After Biden's disappointing performance in the first presidential debate in late June, many of them were pessimistic about Biden's candidacy of winning the November election, and they wanted Biden to drop out of the race. And it's not still clear whether Harris has got enough political or electoral capability to defeat Trump in November, but it seems that Democratic supporters think that Harris should be better than Biden, and they are more enthusiastic about supporting her. So I think basically Trump has got his own time last month, but this month is time for Harris. And the tough competition between the two candidates will come back next month And the second presidential debate will be very important for Harris to demonstrate her political capability to presidential voters. And if she meets or exceeds the expectation, or simply she does better than expected, she will be positively perceived by the voters, and she will get some kind of a credit out of the event. But otherwise, the honeymoon effect for Harris will decrease. So we will see what will actually happen in the coming weeks.
And for another voice, joining us from New York is John Zogby, founder and senior partner at John Zogby Strategies. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning.
So the Democratic National Committee has announced that Vice President Kamala Harris has secured the support of 99% of delegates to formally become the Democratic Party's presidential nominee. Tell us about the significance of Harris's win.
Well, it is the 99%. There have been seriously challenged nominations in the past, some of which have ultimately hurt the person who won the nomination because there was bitterness on the part of those that did not support the front runner. In this case, what the Democrats needed was unity and no bitterness, and they got it. You can't really do much better than 99%, can you? And so in that sense, then, she goes into her convention with a bump, with a measure of goodwill, with what so far looks to be an ideal running mate. And she should get, as it normally happens, another honeymoon period during and following her convention. Now, none of that assures victory, but what it does assure is so far the transition from President Biden and all of the questions that had been raised about President Biden's mental capacity and his age, those are off the table. It is now Harris's path and Harris and Walz's path together.
Well, Harris saw overwhelming support after President Biden left the race, as you mentioned, and she also became the first woman of color to lead a major party ticket. So it seems her nomination holds significance in many different ways. And staying with you, Dr. Zogby, the Harris campaign is seeing a strong surge of support among young voters in key swing states as well. Some are calling it the Kamala Harris youthquake. The Morning Consult polling showed Harris leading Trump 48% to 44%. What drives her popularity among the youth?
And that 48-44 figure is exactly what my poll is showing. And so we mirror this Morning Consult poll of a 4-point lead. You know, in order for a Democrat to win, they need to put together what we call the Obama coalition of those groups that thrust Barack Obama into election and then re-election. And broadly speaking, when Joe Biden was in the race, he was slipping among a number of key voting groups, but in particular among youth. He was polling in the mid-40s, whereas he had received as high as 60 and then 66% of the support of 18 to 29-year-olds. We see in this first Kamala Harris poll that she's polling 59% of young people, not quite yet matching Barack Obama's output, but a whole lot closer than when Biden was in the race. Now, why? I think some of it has to do with Gaza, and that college-age young people and young people of color who were very turned off by the Biden administration's response to the war in Gaza are coming back home to the Democratic Party. She has a softer position, and apparently it looks like Governor Walz has a softer position. And then, of course, there is the issue of student debt and the issue of inflation, which are very difficult to tackle. But President Biden, has been trying, but he he lost his capacity to dominate the message that he wanted to send during the campaign because everything became clouded on the issue of age and mental acuity.
Young voters could play a key role in the upcoming presidential election, and many of them seem to be much more energized and enthusiastic than when they faced a race between Biden and Trump. And as you mentioned, student debt, inflation, and the war in Gaza are some of the issues that they seem to be very much interested in. Professor Min, so Vice President Kamala Harris, she has chosen Minnesota Governor Tim Walz as her running mate, and she formally introduced him during a Philadelphia rally on Tuesday, where the two officially kicked off their battleground state tour. Who is Tim Walz? Why was he chosen? And what sort of impact would he bring to the race?
Yes, Harris chose the Minnesota Governor Tim Walz as her running mate. And Walz is 60 years old, but it's a little bit harder to believe. But he is in the same age with Harris. And he was a member of the U.S. House of Representatives from 2007 to 2019. And he represented Minnesota's first congressional district. And then he served as the Minnesota governor. And but he was born in West Point, Nebraska, not Minnesota. And after high school, he joined the Army National Guard and had a bullet-collar manufacturing job, like the factory worker. And he later graduated from a college in Nebraska and moved to Minnesota and worked as a high school social studies teacher and football coach. So I think his career shows why he was chosen as a VP candidate. Harris mentioned that she liked his policies, Midwestern appeal, and the likelihood that he would be a loyal running mate and governing partner. Specifically regarding his policies, during his gubernatorial terms, Walz signed various legislations like free school meals and bolstering state infrastructure, gun background checks, and codifying the abortion rights, and free college tuition for low-income families. So it shows that he has made achievements for the progressive agendas. In addition, it seems that Walz has potential to speak to rural voters like Midwestern appeal. He was raised in rural Nebraska, and he's the son of a homemaker and a public school administrator. And he enlisted in the Army National Guard at the age of 17. And meanwhile, he spoke out in favor of the assault, the weapons ban, but he's the hunter who doesn't oppose to the basically gun ownership. And interestingly, he received the A rating from the National Rifle Association, NRA. So it shows that he went through an ordinary rural person's life in the Midwest, and his the biographical background can appeal to the Midwestern rural voters like people in Michigan and Wisconsin. And the last but not least, it seems that Harris felt a good chemistry with the Walz after interviewing with him. During the VP selection process, loyalty was emphasized as one of the most important criteria for Harris. So her selection of Walz suggests that she trusts Walz not only help her win the election, but also to help her govern. But the problem with him is that voters don't know much about him. So they needed to work hard to let voters know about him during the presidential campaigns in the coming weeks and months.
So a 90-day full sprint is expected, and we'll see how Harris and her good chemistry with Walz what sort of an impact that would have in the tight race between Harris and Trump. We'll see how it goes. And Dr. Zogby, an intense tug of war between Harris and Trump over a potential presidential TV debate, with each in favor of a different broadcaster and date. Give us your thoughts and your prospects for this.
You know, this Joe Biden leaving the race really threw off the Trump presidential plans, because he was all set to debate what he perceived to be a weakened Joe Biden, and we saw that happen certainly in the first debate. And he was prepared to pummel harder against Joe Biden and to really hammer away at Mr. Biden's age and his mental acuity. And that was taken away from him. And now there is a fresh face. There is a woman of color. Trump will have to be very careful not to be a bully. And by the same token, he's going to have to be forced to discuss some issues instead of mean-spirited one-liners, which he often has seemed to be able to get away with. And so in many ways, this has thrown off his plans. And the ABC News debate was to be seen by the Trump administration as a crowning achievement. He had not so much won the first debate against Joe Biden, but Biden lost the first debate. The second time around was just supposed to be sweeping the floor. But now there's energy on the part of the Democratic candidate and the team. There's joy, as Governor Walz pointed out. There is, at least as far as the early polls are concerned, a return of some of the anxiety-ridden Democratic coalition members, blacks and Hispanics and suburban women and younger voters. They seem to be returning back to the fold. And that's a completely different context than former President Trump was prepared to do. So, of course, there's going to be a battle over these debates.
And Mr. Trump, he just yesterday said that he will debate Harris, and an announcement on that is expected soon. So we'll see how things pan out. Professor Min, U.S. recession fears, as reflected in the global stock market chaos that we saw earlier this week, has once again put economy in the election spotlight. How would economic uncertainties shape the landscape of the tight race between Harris and Trump?
Yes, basically the economic uncertainties, like economic recession fears, are not good for Harris because the Biden government should be responsible for the economic situation of the country. And as you know, Harris is the number 2 person of the government. So Trump criticizes Harris for the negative news for the U.S. economy. But I think it's not clear whether or how much such economic uncertainties could affect the vote intention of the presidential voters before the November election. As you know, President Biden has argued that his government did a good job for the U.S. economy, like inflation has decreased to around 3%, unemployment rate is pretty low, and many domestic jobs were created. But voters are still reluctant to accepting his argument because the cost of living is still too high in the country. So the COVID-19 pandemic messed up the supply chains, and the prices went up for everything, including gas, food, and rent. So voters complain, like, I'm just getting by, but nothing left for the future. Prices are too high, and everything has gone up. So, of course, the possibility of the economic uncertainties is not a good news for the U.S. economy, but it's not certain how voters would perceive the economic uncertainties in relation to the inflation and the cost of living, and therefore it's not clear how much it could affect the voters' daily lives and their financial situations before the election day. So I think the most important economic factor that could have a critical impact on vote intention is the cost of living. So we need to see how the economic recession fears will be connected to voters' perceptions about inflation and the cost of living.
And Dr. Zogby, the killing of Hamas political chief Ismail Haniyeh and escalating tensions in the Middle East is also expected to have an impact on the U.S. presidential race. Would Harris's Middle East approach depart from Biden's?
In some ways, it would. If we focus on what started this round, and that is the Gaza. October 7th, invasion of Israel, and then the response. In that regard, we do see that Kamala Harris early on expressed an empathy for the people of Gaza and said, yes, Israel has a right to defend itself, but the way it defends itself is something that we should care deeply about. In addition, when the student demonstrators were really taking over campuses all across the United States, and at several points in New York and California and in Chicago and elsewhere, when there appeared to be the approach to violence, real violence, she and Governor Walz expressed some sympathy for the demonstrators, not for violent tactics, but for what the demonstrators were saying. That could be something that does appear to be something that could appeal to younger college age voters, bringing that back into the fold, and also something that could signal a change in direction of U.S. policy. Yes, support for Israel, but within bounds.
So largely a continuation of the Biden administration's foreign policy, but Harris will have her distinct nuances. Professor Min, before we let you go, is South Korea ready to welcome Harris or Trump as the next leader of its closest allied nation?
Yes, absolutely. Regardless of which candidate would win the November election, South Korea will definitely respect the result of the upcoming election, and it is ready to gladly work with the next U.S. government. Basically, I think the ROK-U.S. alliance will remain strong, and the bilateral cooperation between the two countries will be maintained or strengthened after the November election. It's mainly because the strategic interests and considerations of the two countries will not change drastically just because of the upcoming presidential election. The ROK-U.S. alliance has been the irreplaceable foundation for South Korea's security, peace, and prosperity. And the alliance is also important for maintaining U.S. strategic interests in East Asia and Indo-Pacific. And South Korea is one of its key allies that U.S. could trust in terms of maintaining its leadership in the region. Of course, which candidate would win the upcoming presidential election could affect how the two countries would operate the alliance and how much more South Korea could play a great role and make a bigger financial contribution. But these matters should be manageable and will not make an impact on the durability of the alliance. So again, South Korea is ready to respect the outcome of the upcoming U.S. presidential election, and it is eager to closely work together with the next U.S. government.
So decades-old South Korea-U.S. alliance is bigger than the possible change of U.S. government. Thank you, as always, Professor Min, for your in-depth analysis.
Thank you.
And many thanks to you as well, Dr. Zogby, for sharing your valuable perspectives.
Thank you.
And that brings us to the end of the show. Thank you for watching, and be sure to tune in same time tomorrow to join our conversation. Goodbye for now.
Completely new. But something anyone can relate with. Flawlessly made.